people would book all these contracts out, and then as the price of the C market kept going up and up and up and up and up, producers would just default on the contract because the price that they had locked in, a year or two prior was all of a sudden really low.
I mean, I saw that firsthand in Ethiopia where I was working with TechnoServe. Tons of farmers had contracts with Starbucks at like $2.20, but it's like with the C market at $3. I don't blame the producers for being like, I can just sell my coffee into the market for $3. The more we could move away from the supply and demand of commodity market pricing to paying a great price for quality, the more that we can create partner relationships that work for both partners.
This is a conversation that I had with my business partner, Charles, about the record high coffee prices that are happening right now. Charles is a CFO here at Cat and Cloud, and he's got a Wall Street background. So he used to do investment analytics and portfolio management on Wall Street. And after he exited Wall Street, he actually worked in the green coffee sector. So he worked in Ethiopia and South Sudan for TechnoServe. So he's got this financial knowledge and really incredible knowledge of green coffee and coffee at origin. He's got firsthand experience with both of those. So being able to talk to him about rising coffee prices, how it affects not just the green coffee world, but us at the roasteries and the cafes, it was really interesting. So this is a conversation we recorded for the Cat and Cloud podcast, and I just decided to break out the camera at the last minute. If you want to listen to an audio version of this, you can just type in Cat and Cloud on whatever podcast app you choose, and this will pop up along with all of our other podcasts. We've been doing this for close to 10 years now. So without further ado, let's get into it. So wanted to talk about the C market. It is at its highest level ever this year. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's correct.
So just kind of wanted to get your take on what led to that, how that happened, and then maybe give a primer for people who aren't familiar with what the C market is or how coffee buying works. So what is the C market? If you had no idea what the C market was, what does that mean?
Yeah, definitely. I think, and we'll even back up and say, cool, what is coffee, right? Coffee is an agricultural product.
Right.
And if you want to kind of back up even more, like I'd say, backing up, just even thinking about trying to create a structure where there can be international trade of agricultural products, right? Is like a really hard place to start. Like think back to like the 1800s or something. Like how do we decide a price for agricultural products of different qualities from different countries? Like how do we, as companies got bigger and we're buying like large amounts of of coffee that only grows in certain countries, right? It's like there's no, there's a little bit in Hawaii, but there's not a lot of, right, for the coffee that's being drank in the United States, in Europe in like the early 1900s or middle 1900s. It's like all that coffee has to be imported. So what is the system that we're going to use to essentially assign, so to know that as a company I'm buying coffee of a certain quality? And that's where the C market for any agricultural product was created, is created as a way to assign like money for quality, money for certain levels of quality that can be scaled, right? The amounts are obviously bags, but it's containers of products, whether it's coffee or cacao for chocolate or corn or wheat, right? It's like the U.S. ships wheat, and corn all over the world, right? It's like the buyer and the seller need some kind of system to know that as a seller, I have this quality, I'm going to get paid this price. As the buyer, I know I'm going to receive this quality, I'm going to pay this price.
Right.
And that's the foundation of like really what the C market was created for, was like for like the large scale transfer and trade of agricultural products throughout the world.
Got it. And then the C stands for commodity, correct?
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah.
Cool.
So I guess with that as the starting place, right? It's, in theory, the price then is based on supply and demand, right? Which is tough, again, for agricultural products. It's like, it's not totally, right? It's supply and it's like basic economics. Once you start into like the free market system, it's, there is some quality aspect to it, But ultimately, like, there's supply and demand, and that's, if we want to jump ahead to what we're seeing in the coffee market, it's like that's the reason we're seeing higher prices is really just basically like less supply coming out of Brazil. And it's like, if Brazil accounts for 30, 40, 50%, half of all the Arabica coffee that is bought and traded in the world, it's like what happens in Brazil cascades and flows down and affects really the price for coffee that everyone will pay.
Right. So, to minor sidebar on this one. So, how does the C market tie into roasters who do what we do, or let's call them high-end specialty roasters? Because you've got a C market price, which is essentially a base price, what you talked about. Like, we agree that coffee as a whole can be traded at this price point.
Yep.
And then you have differentials, or individual pay per quality.
Yeah, differentials are just other layers of quality, essentially, right? It's a way for large scale businesses, and just for how the system works, to say, cool, like, the C market is this quality, so let's take coffee. It's an amount of quality, or it's amount of coffee with a certain number of defects, right? That's going to be like what the basis is for each of different levels of quality here, right? And then so as you move up that chain, it's like, cool, coffee with like almost zero defects, right? As you get higher levels into specialty, it's like, and cool, we're going to attach a differential for the difference in the quality between C market coffee with X number of defects to coffee with almost no defects.
And do you know what that defect number is off the top of your head for the C market?
No, I don't.
But we're generally talking commodity grade coffee, so not unlike what you would see on your grocery store shelf in terms of the standard Folgers, all these normal big box names, right? We're not talking about specialty coffee.
Correct.
And then the specialty coffee designators, once you get over 80 points scoring for any cup of coffee or any particular lot of coffee, that enters into specialty.
Right.
And then within specialty, there's a huge range.
Exactly.
Right? There's like a big difference between something that scores 81 and something that scores a 90.
Yeah.
And then the differential would essentially reflect, that score. Well,
and dynamics in certain countries.
Right. Okay. Yeah. Cool. So why is the market so heavily influenced by places like Brazil or Colombia?
Right. Yeah. Just due to the size of the harvest, right? It's like Brazil is gonna produce, like I said, almost probably like half of the Arabica coffee that gets produced in the world. Colombia produces 10, 12, 15 million bags a year. Maybe Brazil, it's like maybe around 50 million bags a year.
It's been so long since I looked at the numbers.
Yeah, totally. And so just due to the outsized impact that those countries have in the market, it's like that's where you're seeing really the weather affect a agricultural product, and the uncertainty around, right? It's like another thing with when you look at markets, any kind of market, is that the people who transact in that market are always looking ahead, right? They're always using that market to try to look ahead to what the situation is going to look like. What's the supply and demand situation going to look like? Not just right now, but 6 months or a year into the future. So right now you're seeing, again, the continued ascent of the C market based on people trying to estimate not just what this harvest is going to look like, but what the 25-26 harvest is going to look like. And as, inherently flawed humans, it's really difficult to estimate anything correctly, but people do their best, and that's their job. And they're coming out with numbers of the damage to the Brazil crop and what that's going to look like in 25-26, and they're essentially forecasting almost at like, hey, we're gonna have like the lowest supply that we've had in 3-4 years. And it's like over those
next couple of years.
Yeah. And that in those past 3-4 years, it's like the demand for coffee is still rising. So you're creating this supply demand imbalance that is essentially leading to these like higher prices as people try to, as bigger companies are really driving this, they're trying to lock up their supply now. And so they've got this buying pressure into the market. And so whenever you have more buyers than sellers, the price of something is going to rise.
Right. Because you could, as a roaster, especially if you have a lot of money and you're really big, you can commit to buying X amount of coffee you could lock in this year's price for several years. And the benefit to that on your end is obviously lower price for green coffee, relatively
or just
speaking.
That you know, or just
that you're going to have the coffee.
Right? You know what your prices are going to be.
And then the benefit on the producer's end, theoretically, is that you can sell all of your coffee. So I remember
at a minimum, right? The minimum price.
Right. So I remember before, and I can't remember, I'm really bad with long-term dates, but this isn't the first C market that I've seen. 2010. Okay.
Yeah.
So I remember one of the things that happened during that era was people would book all these contracts out, and then as the price of the C market kept going up and up and up and up and up, producers would just default on the contract because the price that they had locked in, a year or two prior was all of a sudden really low.
Yeah.
And the C market was up enough to where it's like, hey man, I can make just X amount more money, breaking this contract. And it doesn't seem like there's really a system in place to hold anybody accountable either way.
Yeah.
When you're talking about international trade like
especially
that.
I saw that firsthand in Ethiopia where I was working with TechnoServe, right? We were, essentially like the exporter of all of these co-ops and had contracts with Starbucks, Pete's, in addition to the Stumptowns and like the specialty coffee. But the majority of coffee that's bought out of Ethiopia, that is specialty. It's like Starbucks, Pete's, Nestle, right? They're all buying specialty coffee. And, all these, tons of farmers had contracts with Starbucks at like $2.20, which, that was a good price for the quality level and things like that. But it's like with the C market at $3, it's like I don't blame the producers for being like, I can just sell my coffee into the market for $3. It's like that. What difference that makes for their lives versus the contract at $2.20. Again, you could argue over time, is that the best decision? If I'm now Starbucks and you defaulted on your contracts, am I gonna, when the price comes back down, because we can talk about that as well, that there's cycles of price increases and decreases. Are you burning bridges? But maybe you're willing to burn that bridge knowing there's somebody else that's going to be willing to buy your coffee later. Because, and again, just to tie it into the cycle, it's cool. It's like coffee, it's $3.75 right now. It's really high. Wow. What that does is just cool. Millions of farmers around the world, they know what the price of all these different agricultural products are, and a lot of them are switchable, right? So it's like when in the past we've seen the price like C market around $1 or under $1, and it's like it doesn't make sense for people to farm coffee under $1.
Right, they're going to grow something else.
So they're going to cut down all their coffee trees and replace them with like avocados or mangoes or something.
Right,
depending on what the
whatever's happening.
Like
in the
right
market,
now, people are planting like a ton of cacao, right? Because the price of cacao is really high. So they're going to switch, switch products. But again, agricultural products, there's a lag to, if right now I'm like, whoa, coffee, it's $3.75. Like I could make a really great living doing that. I'm ripping out, I don't know, whatever, bananas or avocado, let's just say, say something that's at a lower price. And I'm just making that up, avocado or the avocados and bananas, but you're switching to something at a higher price. Cool. It's like you're pulling that out. And so 3 to 5 years later, if everybody's doing that, you're going to have a lot more coffee than you do today.
Right.
And so this is where you get these big commodity cycles of, cool, the price is really high right now. There's usually inherently some switchability, substitutability. Producers will rotate into those higher priced products. And then over the next 3 to 5 years, you'll see supply increase, generally kind of overwhelm demand, and then you'll see that price come back down over some period as the market forecasts that like, oh wow, there's economists and everybody that can see like, oh wow, they've planted X millions numbers of coffee trees. We see that in the next couple of years that's going to produce X hundreds of thousands, millions of bags. Cool. Here, you can kind of forecast what the coffee usage in bags is and what the supply in bags is, and so you can kind of see as that starts to happen that the amount of supply gets higher and higher, and that's eventually what will bring prices down from where they are now.
Right. I wanted to touch on one thing that you said before when you were talking about people just being able to sell their coffee into the market. So this is how I usually explain it, and you can tell me if I'm on track or off track. So for a company like ours, who a certain amount of our coffee is working with producers year over year. We're booking out coffee. We're identifying these lots of coffee and saying this lot of coffee is worth X amount of money because of the quality and because of the relationship we have. And, all of the coffees that we bring in are well over commodity, and we pay a certain amount for those. That would be back to the differential. It's not quite a differential because we're kind of setting our own price based on quality. We're not really letting the market dictate so much, even though it's got these effects on it. So let's say we're buying coffee from Wilson Morales and we're going to pay $4.50 for this certain coffee that he has. If the C market got high enough to eclipse that, well, let's say $3.50 just as an example, because the C market's over that now. So if Wilson wanted to sell his coffee into the market, essentially what he would do is just take all his coffee, harvest it, and just drop it off at the local mill. And they would be able to cut him a check for whatever the market rate is, because they know that when they put that coffee out in the market, like that's just what coffee's going for.
And the exporters have relationships with buyers, and so they're able to move the coffee.
Right. And one of the other things that seems like it would do is disincentivize quality production on the farm side.
Sure.
Because it doesn't make sense to spend the extra time, energy, and labor to do super selective picking. You could strip pick everything, because within any given coffee tree, like cherries are ripening at different rates. It's not like you go do one harvest and you're done. So it's like, why even bother with that when the cost of coffee is so high? That's like, man, I can get $3.75 right now. I'm just put it in a basket, drop it off. Like, is that about right?
Yeah, that's about right. And that's just where, as producers, and you just have to think about, how much am I balancing more money today versus relationships 3 to 5 years in the future?
Right. Because when the market comes back down and it's, sitting in that what do you think will settle on $1.50?
Like $1.50 to $2.50.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. Then it becomes a big benefit if you can get $1 or $2 above that. Right. That's a life-changing amount of money.
Exactly.
So yeah, that totally makes sense. So when we have these, so when you're saying climate, like production's down, like what specifically is production down from? Is it coffee rust? Is it just the weather? There's a lot of talk about global warming in coffee. What exactly are we talking about, or how much do you know about that?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, people kind of categorize the weather that's hitting Brazil this year as like a now I don't know if I'm gonna say it right, as one of the either El Nino or La Nina. I feel like it's El Nino.
One of the L's.
It's one of the L's, but kind of an abnormal weather pattern from what they normally have, and it's created, specifically it's created frost that has really damaged a lot of plants in coffee growing regions in Brazil, as well as now kind of we're in certain parts it's like really dry, and so they're not getting the water, so it's like they're getting kind of like double hit by things that aren't awesome for the for like the best supply of for the health of the coffee trees and that are growing.
Right, because you want generally that humid climate, high elevation. How would I always describe it as like warm, humid days and cool nights, but not freezing, right?
Yeah, you don't want freezing.
To get that proper maturation of the cherry to where you get you get high yields and sweeter coffee. It seems to go together.
Yeah, and I mean, just to even add in another layer to it, it's like you're also seeing record high prices in the Robusta market as well. And that's because Vietnam, as like the largest Robusta producer, has also seen negative weather events that are affecting the Robusta price. So it's like in the past, maybe the price of Arabica didn't go quite so high because there's people that are more able, that are maybe like switching, right? Bigger, larger scale companies that are switching from Arabica into like Robusta.
Right.
But here there's not, because of the higher price of Robusta, it doesn't make as much sense to buy less Arabica, buy more Robusta, because the price of Robusta is so high as well.
Yeah, I remember Dulce was saying that she was shopping around for Robusta just to see what the market was doing. And like you said, there's no benefit to it. Yeah. It's just as expensive.
Yeah, so that's like another layer that might have been like a little bit of an outlet for reducing Arabica consumption in the past that is not, it's not really like a lever bigger companies can pull right now.
Right. I want to rewind one thing I said where I said higher yield and sweeter coffee goes together. I know that Arabica coffees are generally less yield than Robusta coffees. So that's not what I meant. I meant like with the climate and all things being perfect, it's better for every aspect of coffee production.
Definitely.
Yeah. So what's happening functionally for businesses like ours? Because it's not just, with the differentials in place, it's not just the cost of commodity grade coffee goes up. Like
Everything,
cost of all coffee is going up kind of in
up.
lockstep. So how's that affecting, roasters like us and our contemporaries?
Yeah, I think it's almost similar to when we see like a minimum wage go up or something like that. It's like almost a kind of a parallel to where it's like minimum wage goes up and then it doesn't just impact like your frontline employees, that flows through into like all the levels of the organization. And it's with the C market, right? You're raising the floor for all coffees, and so you're seeing that flow through into all the different types of coffee that people buy. And so it's like margin. So coffee's more expensive. Coffee companies' margins will generally be lower, and as a business, you just have to try to find a way to manage through that. And I would say like, without necessarily making any like knee-jerk reactions that may harm your business long term, right? It's like thinking about like, I don't, just personally, it's like, I don't think you want to go out and just raise prices to like a level that might keep your margins in the same way, and try to manage this one specific line item to the detriment of your business longer term, to where coffee being an incredibly competitive business, just immediately going out and raising your wholesale prices or your retail prices, that's going to maybe have a negative effect on your business longer term. So I think taking a more holistic approach and look at the business of like, where can we optimize certain things or gain efficiencies here? And really I kind of think about it's like, how can we make it through so that we're
ride the wave.
Yeah. I do think things are cyclical. It's like, I do think prices go up and down, costs go up and down. So, let's look at the company holistically. How can we put ourselves in the best position to manage this long term and not make any knee-jerk reactions that will negatively affect the business longer term?
Right. I mean, wholesale partners are a great example because, I feel like there's a lot of leeway. I don't think we would want to do this, but I think we have a lot of leeway to play with price in the cafe. And the reason I say that is because our experience is awesome. I believe in it, and people are willing to pay a premium for X amount of experience. And we don't want to exploit our guests or make it difficult for people to come in and participate with us. But I think when you're hands-on in that way, it's easier to have the conversation.
Right.
And then with wholesale partners, like we sell coffee to people who have cafes that are like ours, that essentially depend on their coffee for their livelihood.
Right.
And if we were just to turn the dial the amount at which the C market is increasing, that would be a big problem. Those people would just leave. What are you doing?
I mean, the C market has more than doubled over
the
past 12 to 18 months. So you're going to see that filter into higher costs for all roasters. And again, pass it, there's always the conversation about like, how much of that are you able or you decide to pass on to your guest or your partner.
And raising prices is always painful. It's
always.
Nothing. Nobody ever wants to raise prices.
I hate raising
it's
prices.
It's the worst.
But again, it's like there's also the responsibility to manage the business in a responsible way. And so it's like, we have over the course of the last 10 years, right? We've had situations of raising prices in like kind of small incremental amounts, and we continue to do that in the future as the minimum wages go up, as cost of coffee goes up. Like we'll see those little increases so that we are ensuring that our business model still works.
Right. So I'm thinking about so I'm thinking about a few things that you said. So the weather patterns, like the boom and bust of the C market cycle, right? So let's say, okay, coffee's at a high. We've got a supply and demand problem, essentially. People are going to pull out other crops, start planting more coffee, and then we're going to get increased cost of production, or increased production of coffee, which will ultimately drive costs down. Are people forecasting, like even if people do that, and we have more people using more of their land to grow coffee, are people forecasting weather patterns? Like, are we still going to get a continued negative growing environment for coffee, or is that just a big who knows?
I think that's a really big unknown, but I do think you're seeing, as I don't know, you're just seeing, I would argue, over the course of the last 5-10 years, like a higher volatility of weather and negative weather events that impact crops around the world. So it's like, I think we're kind of in a period of higher volatility to stay. And it's really interesting because if you pulled up a chart of, say, the C market, coffee C market price, and you can find charts on the internet that'll go back to the 70s and show you these spikes that happen, maybe every 10, 15 years or so. Historically, they're relatively short-lived. My concern this time is that it might be a bit longer-lived than it has been in the past, and as roasters, we're going to have to shoulder some of those higher costs over a longer time period than we have in the past. And so it's like that's again one of the unknowns, but that is one of the things that I think could be like a little bit different this time.
Right. Awesome. Anything else that we haven't covered on? I mean, coffee buying is incredibly complex. There's a lot of nuance to it, but in terms of C market, the current spike that's happening, and implications.
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the things, the more, I just wish this overall for the industry, like the more we could move away from the supply and demand of commodity market pricing to paying a great price for quality through relationships, through longer developed relationships, the more that we can create partner relationships that work for both partners, that are fair, and like where both partners are able to, what's the word, not just sustain, but to
it's like thrive. Because it feels like if we can do that, we have a more resilient structure year in, year out, to where, wow, it's nice when I can get a ton of money for my coffee, but I don't want to get $4.75 one year and then $1.20 the next year. Right. It would be better off for me and my family if it's cool. $4 or $4.50 year in, year out. I can count on these people and then be able to roll with them. Right.
This works for my livelihood. In the same way that, like, you don't walk into one of our cafes and a cappuccino is $2. Somebody's paying us $2 one day and they're paying us $8. Next year they're paying us $8. It's like that would be that's so incredibly difficult to run a business or to run your life. Like, if you're in the same way, if your salary was, $2 one day and $8 another day, it's like, how can you plan your life that way? And so that's where the more I feel like we can move toward more of a pricing structure that's based around pricing and quality that works for both partners, it's like that allows everyone, I feel like, a less stressful livelihood, to where they know what the revenue, they know what their income is going to be, they can plan with their family and their, for their children. It's like, and then it removes a lot of the volatility that comes with the C market and the highs and the lows. So that's maybe my other guys, like that's something that we try to do as well, as like, cool, how can we develop longer term relationships with people where we're removing both of ourselves from like the stressful volatility of the commodity market.
Cool. I just want to clarify one thing. So if the commodity market sets essentially this price floor, and then we have differentials that go above the price floor based on quality, then individual relationship coffees are completely removed from that situation, is what you're saying. To where it's, if we're paying $4.50 or $5 for Damian Chavez's coffee, that would be that no matter what, whether or not the C market is $1, $2, $3, $4.
Exactly, right? Because it's more of a relationship based on the specific product that they have, and specifically like where that kind of falls in like what we can pay for it in a sustainable way.
And then when we're talking differentials for different quality, those would essentially be set by the importer or exporter, right? Is that correct? So
even the differentials are kind of set by the market based on the demand for individual countries, right? So the differentials are more variable based on what's happening in a specific country.
Got it. Yeah. So
like
if
Colombia,
if Brazil or Colombia is your baseline, and then you'd have in
like Honduras,
right?
Like a huge harvest, like double the amount of coffee, and it's like there's usually only like a certain amount of Honduran coffee that's purchased each year. It's like, and then they have this huge harvest. It's like you might see differentials, and then and actually you see this more, and like maybe like the C market was low, and so all of that coffee is being like held on to by the producers or by the exporters, and they're not selling it because they're like the price is too low. Well, it's like as you move through the harvest year, if all of that coffee is still in Honduras, you're going to see the differentials for Honduran coffee come in, because at some point they're going to need to sell that coffee, and there's going to be a lot of Honduran coffee relative to the demand for what is usually there.
Right.
And so you're going to see that differential
stacking
compress.
It essentially, and then that market's going to flood.
Yeah. Yeah. Also really, you also can add like currency, like currency fluctuations into the mix as well. Right. That will affect local prices. And that's, again, maybe we're not going deep into that here, but that's another factor that can affect like local prices in producing countries, that can affect differentials as well.
Yeah, that's all.
keep
as
going
you're
down
talking,
the
I'm
rabbit
thinking,
hole.
there's a rabbit hole. You should definitely write a book on this. So that's going to be your homework.
Thank you.
For sure, because you have a great way of explaining it to where you're taking something really complex and making it easy to understand, which is awesome. And the fact that you've lived it and work on this on the day to day, and it's cool. I'm super glad you're here, man. This is awesome.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
For being at the podcast, but also like as a business partner, it's killer. Like we wouldn't be who we are without you, and it's. I just appreciate you, man.
Thanks, man. Appreciate you too.
Well, that's it.
Awesome, dude. Killer. Take care, y'all.